this night go shining bright, colors dance in the night. You don't owe them a thing, it's not up for debate.
Is that right?
Hi everyone, welcome to our Sony docs that dropped today. We have Kathy's InDieZoNe here again, and we have never before seen mask. How about that, Kathy? Welcome.
Okay, I'm hearing a repeat. Am I signed on here twice? There we go. I was signed in twice. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay.
I was getting some feedback on myself. No, there really was. There was quite the document drop on multitude of issues. We knew there was going to be. I mean, we saw from the case summary page yesterday that the replies were due. And as you reported the other day, the jury questionnaires were due to be filed under seal. And then we had this notice of appearance by Allen. And so we saw a multitude of replies. And then Judge Hippler threw on a couple of orders today. There's a couple hundred pieces of paper there, some under seal, but many public. And there's some explosive information in at least, and I haven't gone over any of them, all of them. I've gone over a few of them. I've released a couple of episodes on my podcast and on my YouTube channel about a few. But there's a lot of work still to be done to reading them. What about you? What do you think?
I've only got to read the reply to the touch and the contact DNA, and I did watch your video on this mask. So these are the only two that I'm familiar with right now because there's just so many.
There's so many. Basically what it was, what's released today on the docket, and today being the 26th, I'm on the East Coast, so it's, it was later in the afternoon, is the replies that, that the state replied to the responses from the defense, and the defense did the same thing regarding the responses that were filed by the state. And like people get a little, and it's very confusing, and it's confusing unless you've dealt with this. When you look at, there's three elements, there's three filings in the briefings. We saw it with the motions to suppress. We saw it with the motions to strike the DP. Now with the in limine motions, it goes motion in limine. That's the originating party. And we had the state file some. We had the defense file some. Then we had, then there's a response in opposition. So it's motion. The other side gets to respond and tries to convince Judge Hippler, deny this motion, Judge, and here's the reason why. They have to introduce facts, evidence, and legal authority. And then you have whoever the originating party, whoever motion it was, the final document is the reply. Now, they're not supposed to go back and re-argue their entire motion again. What they do, the reply replies to the response from the other side. Last opportunity for whoever filed the originating motion to persuade Judge Hippler, grant this motion, Judge. So we're done. You're not going to see any more filings regarding the motions in limine. They're all done. There's a lot of things that are filed under seal associated with them as well, unfortunately, but there's a lot on the docket. Now, everything is leading up to the 9th of April when we have these hearings, the 9th, and then if necessary, Hippler set aside the 10th. So it's going to be 2 days in limine, pre-trial ruling on whatever it is that whoever, the moving party, it's whoever filed the motion wants an order granting whatever they're asking for in the motion. So it's going to change the course and scope of the trial. However he rules. If he rules to keep out major pieces of evidence, bam, that's going to be difficult for the state. If he allows certain evidence to come in, bam, that's going to be hard for the defense. So it's his pen. This is all up to the trier of law, who's Judge Hippler. He's going to make that ruling, just like he did on all of the suppression motions, and as he did with everything else that's come before him since venue changed back in September.
Yeah. Welcome, Deviled Eyes. Welcome, Preston B. Good to see you. Thanks for explaining that, Kathy. That just adds a whole nother element to all that detail makes the understanding what's happening so much easier. Thank you.
That's what I try to do. My podcast is not for everybody. I don't go in there and I don't talk theories a lot of time. My audience is more like they want to deep dive into the facts. They want to know what happened. All right. Great. I mean, we've thrown around theories. You and I have done that. I've done it in my real life with people, but it's what is in the court docket. And when you start seeing motion, response, reply, all this other stuff, it's like, what's going on? But the scorecard, again, it's motion, response, reply. We're done right now. No more filings. You're going to be seeing no more filings because Judge Hippler said the 24th was the deadline for the reply brief. So now for the next couple of weeks, they're going to prepare for these hearings and doing some other things like the jury instructions were filed under seal. And now they have to file under seal their objections to the other side's jury instructions. That's coming up on the 31st of March. So these people are working hard behind the scenes, the defense and the state. They're working hard. You might think, oh, yeah, they got the next 2 weeks off. No. They got to prepare for these hearings. And, Hippler's going to be coming on with his questions. You know that. He's going to be coming on with his questions.
Oh, yeah.
Throwing us, I'm telling you, I guarantee it. We've seen him in action now at least 3 major times so far. And he gives little tidbits of information as to how he might rule. And we're going to be talking about that when we go live, because I'm hosting a live. I know you are too. I'm very excited that you will be as well, because we all need help with this DNA stuff, Audrey. It's very difficult to understand. Hi, Mommy Ball.
Yes.
Hi,
welcome, Mommy Ball.
Everyone. Great to see everyone here. So, Audrey, I was really wanting to speak with you this evening. I want to know what you thought about the Becca Barlow. I know that she's a true hero of yours. You like her a lot, right? As
Oh, yeah.
not an expert, but
I
also
do.
as an attorney. What'd you think of her?
I've been waiting. I've been waiting over years, ever since I've ever learned about this transfer DNA, for something like this to come around into the legal system, and it's finally happening. And so it's very interesting to see an attorney write so technical about this DNA, but in a way that's very understandable. So this is a very special moment in time right here that we're able to witness this. No matter what happens in this case regarding the DNA, just being here while Becca does her thing is what is truly incredible.
Didn't you notice, like, because of course, DNA and IgG has been big, one of the most hotly contested issues in the entire case. I think it's probably number one in terms of how much time was spent on it, the battles back and forth. You had protective orders flying around, you had all sorts of accusations being made, hot moments, and all of this other stuff. And now during the first part of the case, it was mainly, if memory serves me, Audrey, please correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it Ann Taylor who mainly who wrote and argued the IgG and the DNA stuff?
Yes, that's right.
It was Ann Taylor, right? So, I mean, just pull out something, not to, downplay Ann Taylor's, abilities, but she doesn't have the DNA background. Becca Barlow does. She has served as an expert. She basically got her foot in the door way back in the 90s when this was just starting to become a thing. We don't just use fingerprints anymore, or we're going to start seeing DNA. If we could start, solving cases through DNA. And it's a different situation. The arguments, the way she phrases her stuff, very different, because she's got that. She comes to the table with 30 years of experience in the field, right? Training. Mm-hmm. She's trained other attorneys. She's had her own practice. She's a force to be reckoned with. But I'm going to tell you right now, my fearless prediction, I'm not a betting person. I see Hitler, with the exception of maybe two so far, of these in limine motions, saying, okay, great, thank you, counsel, thank you, counsel. When you get the ruling, it's up to the jury to decide, because the jury is the trier of fact. They will assess if someone's credible or not credible. They will weigh the importance of the DNA evidence, and they will weigh the importance of DM's witness identification. They will weigh the credibility of all of the witnesses. That's what the trier of fact does. Now, if this were a trier, if Judge Hitler were the trier of law and fact, if this was a bench trial, different story. You got a jury here, though, you know? So therefore, I feel that, I think that in the end, he's going to get a great education. And I think she's going to try really hard. But I just see him saying, let the jury decide. Let the jury decide this stuff. That's just how he's been. He's not going to he didn't put his neck out with trying to change anything regarding the DP. We saw what happened with the suppression motions. And I just see that. But beyond that, what are like two or three things that really got you really interested in this filing today that finally was made public relative to
the number one? Oh, for the touch and contact motion eliminate, is that what you mean?
Yeah. Could you explain, for those of us who are not really as involved in this as you are, Audrey, what's the difference between both?
So touch is an incorrect term for the mechanism of transfer, which is how it moves. Contact is also one of those descriptor words. And so especially for the term touch DNA, I do believe that is prejudicial, because that really does paint a picture in the jury's mind. It implies that the defendant touched a key piece of evidence. And so this is what they're trying to keep out of the courtroom, because of how influential those two words and the word contact can be. Right. So what Becca Barlow has done is she has used a lot of the literature and the scientific journals out there to give a little bit of explanation of that and how that relates to experts in the field, how they're trained, and if they're qualified to testify to something like transfer.
Right. Now, I remember she wrote a very impactful, I thought, motion. The original motion in limine is a must read, because she did go into a lot of detail saying, like, this training for Riley, there is no training that Riley Nolan could have had to give an opinion like she did, like we heard at the hearing on the 23rd when we finally got the transcript. But the problem that I see is I hope there's some sort of an expert witness that the defense has that has provided some sort of affidavit, or who is going to give some testimony, because it just can't be argument, even though she's not an expert. She's not producing any affidavits like she did before. She's arguing the law. So that's the one thing that I think Hitler's going to ask about. And hopefully there is some sort of an affidavit from some type of a scientist, biologist, microbiologist, who will be able to explain this, and not just, it was like, don't remember when we did when change of venue happened? This is the same argument that we had. And we said, look at the state. The state has not produced a single expert. Mr. Thompson and the Assistant Attorney General, what was her name again? Not Nye. They didn't produce one expert.
Beatty.
They didn't produce a single. No. We said that. We said that what's up with the state? Why aren't they producing any experts about the prejudice to someone in this community, or and that it's not that bad and the case should not move? And when I saw that, I said, that's a huge mistake right there. You just can't argue from. You need the expert there who's done the teaching, who's done the periodical reviews, who's maybe, worked in the field for 20 years or 30 years, or done something like Becca Barlow did. So, but she's not that role again. She can't be the defense attorney and also be the expert witness. That ship sailed when she, pro hoc vitaed in. So I'm going to say the same thing here that I did when I criticized the state for not having any expert witness versus the defense, who had, I think, 4 dynamite expert witnesses. And that's why Judge John Judge granted change of venue. He was very impressed by what the 4 experts who got up on the stand that day were, that very long day in Latah County. So I hope that there's, as I said, we don't know who the defense's experts are because their expert witnesses, their lists are all under seal. We might have gotten like a peek of 1 or 2, but their witness lists are under seal. The state, however, they forced them to disclose who a lot of their witnesses were because there was a motion for sanctions because they didn't meet that December 18th deadline regarding who their experts were, what their opinions were going to be. And Hippler got very mad that day. The hearings on the 24th, he just basically, I want over communication. Don't play games with disclosures. So it will be another reason why these hearings on the 9th are going to be a must. I want to see how Hippler starts asking questions about this DNA. I don't know how many cases he's dealt with to this extent where DNA was so important.
That reminds me because in Riley Nolan's reply, she had quoted dissenters from this big report that they all keep referencing. It took 4 years for the scientific community to put that together, and it started in 2020. It came out in May of 2024. It describes the whole direction that they want to take, that scientific forensic science, the whole direction of that field. And they're even bringing over people from Australia and Europe to have some sort of global standardization. But what Riley, she misrepresented and misquoted one of these dissenters. And so Becca Barlow is also, she touches on that in this recent DNA motion. And I just thought to myself, I kind of giggled. I'm like, what if they get the dissenter? I think her name is Dawn or something. Why don't you get that dissenter to come and be?
Well, they would have had to. They had a deadline. Their deadline for disclose. The deadline for the defense to disclose their expert witness has come and gone. January 25th, they needed to disclose who their experts for trial, case in chief, were going to be.
That would be something.
And hopefully they've gotten some under seal, because I don't know how Hippler's going to take it if it's just argument. Although, possibility, he may say, Riley Nolan, great that you worked at ISP Lab, since 2002, and you've been a manager all these years. But, Vic, I think, is going to really hit her credentials. We're not going to see testimony at the in limine hearings, I don't think. But, that might be an issue. But in the end, I feel, not sure, but I feel, 55-45, Hippler's going to say, maybe even 60-40. Hippler's going to say, let the jury figure this out. Who's credible and who's not? I'm not going to take away this evidence. That's except for 2. I think the alibi is probably going to go in favor of the state for the reasons that we talked about last night. I think the self-authentication of those records, where another explosive detail was shared, may go in favor of the defense. As far as everything else, I haven't read a lot of the replies yet because they just got released today. But I can't see Judge Hippler taking a lot away from the jury. This is a jury trial, and that's what they're there for. They're there to weigh credibility. They're there to figure out who seems to be, on the ball with things. Who seems to know what they're talking about. And conversely, they could just, hey, I don't think that Riley Nolan was very knowledgeable, and this is an area that's way above her head, so she can't be given opinions as to this matter.
Well, it depends on how, like you were saying, how Hippler will be, how he will take to this newest report that the scientific community just released, and because in there it says that the jury they are able to decide on the action, but it's
Right.
actually not up to them for the activity level, which is the how and the when. But
Oh.
if a Hippler doesn't take that scientific report seriously, then they probably will be trier of facts of the activity level, the how and the when. But if he does take it seriously, then the jury won't be able to determine the activity level.
Could you just, I know that we've seen the how and the when. Could you just share with us what you mean by that, what the scientific community means by those two terms, the how and the when?
So how is the mechanism of transfer? Was it direct
Mhm.
transfer? Was it secondary transfer? And when is what time did that happen? Because with secondary transfer, it doesn't have to happen during the time of the crime. It could happen anytime before. It could happen a week before, a couple of days before. It could happen afterward. That's the nature of secondary trace. It moves unpredictably sometimes, most of the time.
So it could be a situation where, okay, somebody's at a restaurant, they're having a steak dinner, they're cutting their steak with a super sharp, blade. And then a friend, a colleague that they haven't seen, in a couple of months, walks, "Hey, Joe, how you doing?" They get up, they shake hands, and then he goes back to using that could be a weapon. And then somebody who comes to the table later, maybe the bus people, they grab that and they use it. And that guy who was using it to cut a steak, his DNA's on it. Is that
well? It can actually happen even less. It can happen even less than that. Somebody could walk by, somebody could sneeze. It doesn't have to be touched. You just have to be in proximity, or you don't have to be in proximity. Somebody else could transfer your DNA. They could, because that's what happens with the Lucas Anderson case.
Right.
His DNA was found on the fingernails of a victim, but that Lucas Anderson didn't know the victim, was never near the victim. It was the EMT who actually transferred the DNA. So it's so unpredictable. It could be second, third, fourth, fifth transfer down the line. There's just no way to tell.
It makes you never want to leave your house, not go to the supermarket and or to the to the stores and pick up things, because you're saying that it could be a fifth generation, it could be fifth, it could be fourth, it could be third, and now you're pulled in, and you're now a person of interest.
I do want to point out that I think that the state is trying to make this a different argument than it is, because they're trying to say, well, the amount makes it different, and it doesn't. The amount can contribute to it, but the main argument is, when did that transfer? How did it transfer? Sure, it can move different amounts at one time, but that does not necessarily determine if it was direct, secondary, tertiary, all the way down. Welcome, CJ. Good to see you. Hello, Mommy Ball, Miss Q, and Daniel. Danielle, too. We have a Daniel and a Danielle.
Listen, I wanted to just ask you. This is all these papers that we've seen flying in the past couple of months that has released such information that the public never knew before. We had no idea on a lot of this stuff. The started with the motions, and then the responses, and now the replies, and now the briefings are closed. We won't be hearing anything from either side until the hearing. This is all for the benefit of one person in the world whose opinion really counts right now, and no one else. We're not talking about, appeals down the line. We're talking about Judge Hippler. How's Hippler going to receive all of this? Do you think this is going to go over his head? Do you think Bicabarla is going to be able to make it in a terminology that he understands? Or do you feel that I keep predicting, I can't help it. I just have gotten to know him a little bit just by his rulings before and how he comes across. And he's going to drop some Easter eggs and hints on the 9th, no doubt about it. I think he's going to leave it up to the jury, but I could be wrong. I want to know your opinion, because you're on top of all of this. How do you feel Hippler's going to see this?
I honestly don't know. I don't know enough about him and to see how he would take something like this, but I think Becca Barlow is prepared to impeach Nolan no matter what happens.
She's going
She
to impeach her.
basically said as much in the, oh yeah, she's prepared to do that.
Okay.
So I guess I don't know if it would help. It would help the defense if Hitler kept it out, but at this point, Becca, I believe her when she says she's strong enough just to impeach her.
Right. No, she's, I mean, this is his best shot of persuading Hitler is through Becca Barlow. If this were being presented by Ann Taylor, definite no. Nothing against Ann Taylor. She just doesn't have the background. She doesn't have the 30 plus years of experience. She doesn't have the background litigating this case. For goodness sake, Becca Barlow teaches other attorneys in this field, right? She speaks. She's a speaker. I mean, all of that is important. And we saw her on the stand. I think that she was a major reason that got convinced Judge John Judge to release some, not all, but some of the IGG evidence, that there was such wars going on between the state and the defense. So it will be curious and it will be interesting to see her in action. When Judge Hitler calls, okay, motion in limine regarding, blah, 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 IGG, you're up, counselor. This will be the first time that we're going to see. It's the first time we're going to see Becca Barlow as counsel. We saw her as a witness. Big, big, big difference. So very interesting.
I bet she's going to have Riley Nolan going back to school. Riley Nolan has got to read up on her stuff if she's going to go up against Becca.
My goodness.
Even if Hitler does or doesn't allow in the terms trace or touch and contact, Becca might be able to impeach her on the other stuff too.
Speaking of which, what about the other? I forget what the name, which in limine motion it was, but it had to do with what was it again? Okay, the state and the defense. Very, very rarely in this case do they agree on anything. The only time they've ever agreed on anything was that stuff needed to be under seal because they agreed on the original, the gag order, the non-dissemination order. And they've agreed that everything needed to be under seal. It was Hitler who finally, spanked them and said, stop with this stuff under seal. And that's when we started to see stuff come out. But it appears that they do agree, the two sides agree, that the tip, all they're going to say nothing about the IGG process. And I think that that's a major win for the defense, because I think that a jury sitting up there in Ada County, learning that the FBI was involved in this process to the extent that they were, would probably influence them in a way that was favorable to the state. So now there's not going to be any talk and any discussion about the Fed's involvement here. And now we see the state coming back and saying they have to come. They are right now deciding amongst their investigative team who is going to be the person that will get on the stand to the jury and explain how the name of Brian C. Kohberger came up. But it seemed like they were a little dodgy in terms of we all not hear the same thing from Detective Brett Payne from the transcript when we finally got that transcript from the 23rd of January, the closed hearing, that the first time the team learned Brian Kohberger's name was the evening of the 19th of December, right? When they had their big Teams meeting that they do on Microsoft, and it's whoever is coming in from ISP, the feds, and then it's the war room that they had set up there in Moscow PD. According to Detective Payne, he's the lead investigator of the case. He signed the affidavit of probable cause. They weren't even looking at Brian Kohberger before December 19th. Now, there's some information in the filing that the state made the other day. Number one, they don't like Becca Barlow saying, "Oh, they're watering it down." They took offense to that term. They said that they're going to be thinking, and they will come up with who is going to get on the stand to talk about how Kohberger came onto their radar. But they sort of insinuated that there were some tips that came, like there was 46,000 tips that came in, and they're still coming in every day, according to the defense. This was in their motion for the alternative perpetrators as well. So the state has come back now and sort of insinuating that they also had tips about Koberger prior to. Now, could this just be? And I've had some conversation. Some of the people that are really into this case are overseas, and so they're commenting on my podcast that goes overseas. But that Kathy, you're forgetting the 2 security guards at WSU who turned in his car. It was somewhere around November 12th. Okay. So how do they get around that? Or were there more tips that came in besides that? Maybe they could get to it. Well, yeah, we had tips. We were overwhelmed with tips. We just did not see those tips until later, and then we investigated them. That might be a reasonable, and I could see Judge Hippler buying that 100%. He would accept that, hey, you get 45,000 tips, you can't, but I mean, you get the feds calling you with a tip. You're gonna investigate that one. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that it's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
The police could reasonably say whatever they're going to say. Yeah.
Right. Speaking of people from overseas that are on top of the documents, and anyone more on top of the documents than Sarah, right? She's saying that it is, very, very late where she is. But yeah, some of the people that have been on top, that I get through Spotify and Amazon and Apple and wherever else the podcast goes are overseas. They're really into this case big time. They devour the documents. They look at the evidence back, forth, upside down. I have people that have told me, I've read the affidavit of probable cause over the past 2.5 years, like 50 times. People have told me that. That's how much you're into this case. And this case right now is the biggest case in the United States, bar none, for so many reasons. For this DNA that you're talking about right here that you said we're finally seeing in real time. You've been waiting for this, Audrey, for a very long time. We're seeing in real time how this works in the legal system. My biggest issue about this case from day one is the impact on the First Amendment, that we're supposed to be able to go into any courtroom in the United States and watch legal proceedings anytime. Anytime someone wants to walk in, they should be able to walk into Ada County or Latah County and watch any hearing that they wanted to, be able to see documents. And we were not able to do that until very, very recently, over 2 years after Koberger's arrest, has information. And I'm very excited to talk to you about this one with the bushy eyebrows when you have a minute, because we got, got a bunch of new information today. And if I could, also, there were 4 documents that I also did a podcast episode on having to do with the jury instructions. We did have the 2 jury instructions submitted pursuant to Judge Hippler's order that they were to be filed by both sides simultaneously. I don't know how they called each other and said, "Hey, Bill Thompson, I'm getting ready to file my proposed jury. Oh yeah, Ann Taylor, let's do it right now." So they did on the 24th. Now, anyone that wants to read what those very important jury instructions say, we're out of luck as the public, because Hippler said back in October 9th when he set the deadline, under seal. So they were filed under seal. The objections to the jury instructions from the other side coming up due March 31st. And then we have the super secret hearing closed to the public on the 16th of April that's going to be Hippler with the defense, with the state, and of course, Mr. Koberger. And then they're going to, and then afterwards, after that, Hippler will then make a ruling as to what that final jury questionnaire will be. And then on some date, which we don't know, that's going to be disseminated. It's going to be the jury questionnaires will be given to the citizens of Ada County that are called to do jury duty. On what date, we don't know. That's the only part of the trial order that's redacted. And then we got news today that, remember, I think we spoke last night on your show regarding who is this notice of appearance regarding Allen that came up on the case summary page. We found out today. I think a couple of your very on top of things followers in chat last night predicted that it was going to be Madison Allen, Deputy Attorney General out of Idaho. It is her, but guess what? She has a limited appearance only dealing with voir dire. She's here just to make sure the best jurors are picked for the state of Idaho. She's going to argue the voir dire, anything having to do with jury selection. There's a couple of motions and filings she'll be getting up in front of Hippler, if those are even open to the public, because I don't like the idea. From what I'm seeing here, I think Dyer is going to be closed the process of jury selection. So we had those questions answered today. You can read those, and Hippler signed 2 orders today, putting under seal the jury instructions. So expect to see, I think it's the 31st, another filing under seal, and that's when the objections to the jury. You start talking jury questionnaires, trial's not that far off. So I wonder, do you think both sides are prepared?
I don't know this case.
I don't know. We're going to find out. We're going to find out. Well,
yeah.
As we get closer to, it's a lot of it's going to really center on, that Hippler has just rendered an order on the 7th defense motion to compel discovery. This had to do with the 22nd supplemental discovery request. And he wrote there, yes, we're going to, this document is under seal. Big surprise. Every single supplemental request for discovery from January of 2023, all the meat, to quote Harsh, all the meat and potatoes, what they're asking for and responding with is under seal. The exhibits are all under seal. So a big shockaroonie. He put the exhibit that the state responded to under seal, but then he said until a hearing, and the defense has asked for a hearing. So let's just say that Hippler decides, the only time we've seen him kind of get a little upset was when he learned that expert witness disclosures weren't going to the defense. He didn't buy what the state was saying. And that's where, people seem to think, oh God, he's so biased. That's the one thing that everybody, whether you're pro defense, you're pro state, nobody seems to like the judge and thinks that the judge is biased for the other side. But Hippler really, he gave them sort of a tongue lashing. I invite you to take a look at that hearing on the 24th. He didn't like that information was being withheld. So let's just say Judge Hippler, at this forthcoming hearing on this motion to compel, the 7th motion to compel filed by the defense, let's just say he orders them to turn over documents. That might have an impact on the trial. It might need to get the trial moved because now defense is getting all this information. They're going to say, hey, we were prejudiced. We asked for this stuff back. And I think they filed their 22nd supplemental request for discovery somewhere around November, December, somewhere around there. If they would have turned this stuff over 5 months ago, we could prepare our, Mr. Koberger is being prejudiced here. We need to have the trial date moved, just what Hippler's going to want to do. But, that's a possibility. So we got that hearing. It hasn't been set as of today. And the defense wants an hour oral argument on their motion to compel. Oh, so here you go. You got a reply to state's response to defendant's motion in limine number 7. All right. The most confusing information, like people keep saying, what is this mumbo jumbo? I don't understand. Okay. Again, just motion, response, reply. This is the defense filed a motion in limine number 7. I like how they numbered them all. They made it very easy to follow. Motion in limine number 7 having to do with witness identification by bushy eyebrows. They filed their motion in limine a few weeks back. The state of Idaho filed the second item in the pleading or in the briefings, response and opposition. They filed their response and opposition. They want this information to stay in the case. Judge Hippler, the defense doesn't know what they're talking about. Deny this motion, please. So now we say the defense, remember, it's their motion in limine, so they get to have the last word. They're replying to what the state responded. It's a reply to the state's response, and that's it. So here we say reply to state's response to defendant's motion in limine in attempting to convince Judge Hippler, final word here, please grant this motion. This has to do with there have been some extremely infamous things about this case. One is the identification by bushy eyebrows. Right, Audrey? Do you think so? How many times has this term been debated? Mainstream media, in conversations that people, how could she have seen bushy? Yeah, maybe it stood out. If you want to see bushy eyebrows, I can tell you it's subjective, which is what they say here. But we got some bombshells dropped here today. One is that DM. Now, I have always said, why didn't they get an artist rendition to come and sit with DM? These artists from these courtrooms, they come up with sketches And when the person's arrested, you're like, oh my God. Now, yeah, okay, he had his face covered, but there's certain points that an artist can pull out of a witness. So that's my first question: is why have they never had? We know that they learned minutes after MPD arrived that DM saw this person, or allegedly did. So immediately get an artist in there and have her sit with DM and try to extract information from DM. Now, what Koberger's doing here, buying through, they always come through. Koberger's not pro se. He's buying through his attorneys of record and hereby replies. See, it's a reply to the state's response. The state, what are they responding to? Well, they're responding to the defendant's motion in limine regarding witness identification by bushy eyebrows, filed on March 17th, 2025. The defense's original motion, for those that want to read the original motion, February 24th. It's one of the ones that were filed on February 24th. Why those days? Because Judge Stephen J. Hippler said so in the January 31st, 2025 order, where he amended the trial order regarding motions in limine, and he set the schedule. Can we go to the next page? If you want to skip, go to like the very end. Can you possibly go to the bottom of this filing where it does have, here's all the argument. This is where they get into the leak. There it is. There it is, page 9. So what probably happened is she's sitting there. She's being interviewed. This is DM. One of the times that she was interviewed, we find out here she was interviewed 5 different times. You see, she's interviewed 5 times, and then we see her. If you can kind of go down a little bit past the conclusion section, when I get off the bus, take everyone down, just in case. That's right. Well, I'll stay off that bus then. Daniel's taking our DNA. All right, so this is Alyssa Mize. The only attorney that we know of so far who's ever appeared before Judge Hippler before is Alyssa Massoff. So this is the actual sketch. When afterwards, the attorney, Gooch, is it, who interviewed her, I think it was the 3rd time. First time she was interviewed by MPD Officer Nunez right outside of the house upon his arrival. Second time, she's hauled down to the police station, and there she's faced with Mallory, who interviews her. Those both happened on the 13th of November, day of the crimes, and then she's brought back in a 3rd time. And the officer says, if you ever seen a bacalara or something, balacara, that is a fancy name. I can't stand when people use unnecessary large names. Like curriculum vitae in, Judge Stephen J. Hippler in the pretrial and trial order. Why can't you just call it a resume? People understand what a resume is. All right, we don't have to go CV, curriculum vitae. Same with this. To me, this is like a ski mask, a version. But she pulls it out, a photograph of a balakar or whatever, however it's pronounced, shows it to DM, and then DM comes up with this, according to the defense. Now, DM comes up with this sketch. You'll see the evidence sticker if you go down just a little bit more, Audrey, at the bottom right-hand corner. This was produced in discovery. So therefore, we just talked about motion to compel. The defense probably asked for all witness statements, everything else, and this was turned over. It's Bates stamped there, 008947. That's like right after this would be 008948, would be something else. But you see here, this is marked as defense, although they got this from the state, guaranteed. DM is not producing this to the defense. No, this came from the interview on, I think it was the 17th of November. So we see here, it's defendant's motion in limine, number 7. Exhibit number 11, identification evidence. That is the Ada County, case number. So probably what was happening is she's sitting in. She asked to come in to meet with investigators. They're interviewing. They have a legal pad there. Say, okay, could you draw what you think, as you remember? Now it's already been a few days, and what Alyssa Massoff is arguing here is that, number 1, misidentification by witnesses, because people are human. We don't have sketches in our brains where we can take a photograph and then, retrieve it later. You're going from memory with stuff. And number 1, what they're saying here is they're saying that she was inebriated at that time. They're saying also that it was dark. They're saying that she had made some statements. I don't know if it was a dream, if I saw what I saw or not. And then they're also suggesting that there was some suggestions that were planted. Like she never came up with the idea of bushy eyebrows. One time that came from Mallory. And then she's saying here she was shown a picture and then she came up with this. So they're very sus on this situation here, if we could use, for want of a better term. They then we have now this piece of evidence never before released to the public. We also learn in this in limine motion of whereabouts, what happened when police arrived. What do you think happened when, okay, so they get the call, what was it, 11:56? They're there in minutes. They're there just before noon. I've heard 11:58. I've heard 11:59. It's just before noon. And you hear Nunez, it sounds like, speaking on the 911 call, okay? So about 12:16 or 13, so this would have been within 20 minutes of his arrival, Nunez pulls DM aside. He's on body cam, and he's interviewing her right there outside of the house. They don't separate whoever was there. They're saying there were friends there. We have the two roommates there, and they're not separated. It reminds you of John Bonet. When law enforcement in Colorado arrived at the Ramsey home, there were all these people in the house all over the crime scene. They actually went downstairs. The father moved John Bonet, found her, moved her. So they're just saying it was just contaminated so badly. And the first thing you do, and I've done investigations in my life in management, you tell the witnesses, don't talk to each other, because if you talk to each other, then I got to go talk to whoever you talk to and the 10 people that they may have talked to, because we're trying to figure out what happened here. We're trying to re-engineer everything and figure out what happened that got us to this situation. Didn't separate them, didn't even instruct them, do not speak with other people. And the reason why that is so crucial is that, what do you she was just through, it was a horrendous experience. She's saying at 4:00 in the morning this happened. Can you imagine the other people and her friends, her family members of the victims wanting to know what happened. And every time she tells that, oh, really? Then what? Her memory could be impacted. Her memory. And what the other thing that Massoff is saying here is we already have it at 8-hour gap. So she's having to think back 8 hours the minute, and she's already spoken with people about it, the minute Nunez hits her up with that first interview. So now we find there's lots of opportunity for contamination, lots of opportunity for her memory to have been impacted, even if she's not thinking that way. But it could have been just because of the time and the number of people that were there and who she might have talked to. And then come to find out, Audrey, the night of the 13th,
Yeah.
they have to sleep. They're probably exhausted, right? They were up all night talking, whatever. And now they find out what happened in the house. And DM's been interviewed. I'm sure BF was also interviewed. And the friends were possibly also interviewed. Where do you think they slept the night of the 13th? It's a Sunday night going into Monday. Couldn't go back to 1122 King Road. That's for sure, right?
Right. I was thinking hotel.
Well, yes, but do you think they got separate hotel rooms for people? No. DM and apparently BF as well, and all of their friends, they stayed in the same hotel room. What do you think they talked about that night? Whenever they checked in that night what do you think? They probably were up all night talking about this, crying, talking about this. So you have the potential for more contamination from DM. That's another kernel of information that the public's only learning right now. The fact that the witnesses were not separated. So we now can, if I might be so bold, venture a guess as to how all the other witness interviews and potential POI interviews went, right? If that's how, this is the number one witness for the prosecution right here. And if this is what happened here, could we only venture a guess of all of the dozens of people that got cleared, right? If we go back to those early days and the early news conferences and the press releases, this one's getting cleared, that one's getting, and I said to myself, how could they possibly clear all these people that quick? Because I know how long investigations take. And then one person, if they've talked to 3 people, you got to go talk to those 3 people. You got to get records, give me your time, and maybe have to, do other steps. So if this is how they treated the, not to say interrogation, but interviews, 5 of them with DM, I wonder, I'm anticipating that when we start to see those documents that we've all been looking for, the interviews of the inner circle, who that you look at first, and you look at hard, and you look at for a long time, how those interviews went. So again, even with all of these issues that the defense may raise, and I think that Alyssa Massoff did a really good job in breaking this down and explaining misidentification from witnesses and how powerful it would be if DM, but she hasn't done that before. They asked her point blank, can you, once he's arrested, they threw down, I don't know if they threw down 5 driver's licenses or what they did. She could not identify him. And I think that's kudos for her, because she would have been, could you imagine, she would have been, thought of as such a hero for pointing the finger at Kohberger. She said, I can't. She was truthful. She was honest. So now I can't see her getting on the stand and saying, that's my guy over there, and not being crucified by whoever cross-examines her, right? So, but Massoff went into, it's great read. It's a great read. It's not real, of course they get into the legal discussions, and they get into the tests as to how you got to look at, different prongs, and, about witness identification and how people have been wrongly convicted. That's why the Innocence Project exists, right? So, which DNA has exonerated so many people that were pointed to by witnesses, wrongfully. So, but even with all that, I don't see Hitler taking this away from the jury being the trier of facts. That's my fearless prediction that that's what I see him doing with a lot of these in limine motions, basically saying, hey, I'm the trier of law. If this were a bench trial, it'd be a different story. It's not. It's a jury trial. Let the jury figure it out. If they believe DM, they don't believe DM. If they think that, tainted, if they planted, thoughts in her mind, or whatever happened, that's for the jury to decide. That's how I see Hitler ruling.
Well, welcome, Winter Bliss. Good to see you.
Yeah, hi. Mommy Bull has a good to see you here, and thanks for your comments. I always appreciate it. How many staff crunch the info besides the 4 assigned attorneys? Good point. Mommy Ball's bringing up a very good point, that there may be paralegals. They may have, let's just say Ann C. Taylor Law. She went out on her own last year, right? She put a shingle on her office. So maybe she's got law students who want to earn. How it works is you can maybe work for a private attorney, doing some work in law school last semester to earn some credits by working actually in the office, preparing the pleadings, speaking with the clients. As a 3rd-year law student, she might have, what 3rd-year law student that would be interested in criminal law wouldn't want to work this case? And they do it for free. They do it for credit and to get that experience. So unknown, how much I think the state has a lot more resources than the defense does. Usually, I think he's very lucky that he didn't just get like an overworked assistant public defender. He got a really strong defense attorney in Ms. Taylor, although some people are a little upset. I'm going to say I am too, because I think this alibi defense was a complete waste of time, and I don't know why they dragged it out this long. It's like, but besides that, paralegal, she might have paralegals. There may be law students. She might have an intern working for her. The state, they got the resources of the state. They can have as many. We saw another assistant attorney general who's coming aboard just to work for Dyer. That's all she's doing. Her bottom line is she wants the best jury, most favorable to the state picked, when voir dire starts happening on July 30th. Ms. Allen that joined the team. What do you think, Audrey? Because there's a lot of stuff to do. They got deadlines. How many people do you think are
Oh,
working
yeah.
on staff, right? You got Becca Barlow. She works for her own firm. She might have an intern at her firm helping her, or paralegal helping her. Then you have Elisa Massoff, same there. Jay Logston, although he is an assistant public defender, we're not seeing much of him. He hasn't really signed anything. We haven't seen any motions. He might not even be at the hearing, on the 9th. He might not even be there because he didn't write anything. What purpose? He's not. Usually it's whoever writes the motion or the response to the reply argues it. So, yeah, big day coming up on the 9th.
They probably only have less than a handful. Yeah.
Right.
They probably have less than a handful of the staff.
Sure.
The 9th will be here before we know it. Oh my gosh. I can't wait.
Really will. And then the following week, then they do the 16th. A few days later, then they're meeting to, try to hash out the jury instructions, or not the jury instructions. I'm sorry, the jury questionnaires. So what do you think about both sides' evidence that we've gotten peeks of so far? What's impressed you? What's not impressed you? Do you think that, what do you think of the state's case? Of course, a lot of the evidence is unfortunately under seal at this point.
I think a lot of the state's evidence needs a lot of explaining. It's not really self-evident. So,
yeah.
Depending on how they explain it, that could make it either a little bit stronger or a little bit weaker. I think that the cell phone is pretty strong. How about you?
I think that I think both sides got, I think that DNA on the sheath needs to be explained in a way that this jury understands it. That's not a good fact for him. I think that the divulsion, now of course, they're saying that they're going to be able to tie it back to a Koberger purchase, but I think also that that's a bad fact, that there apparently was a K-bar, a sheath, and a sharpener that went to the house in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania in May. And although it appears to have been a family account, Mr. Koberger was living in that. It wasn't like a family of 10 people. It was just him, his father, his mother, and maybe one of his sisters. And we went over the Pennsylvania documents. There was no, from what we read, there was no sheath that was recovered from the Pennsylvania search. And that they tore that house apart, really, looking for it. So that can be looked at in two ways, like everything else. Everything can be explained. The state's going to look at and that say, see, okay, the sheath and the weapon should be in the house. Where is it? And then the others say, well, see, I told you, he doesn't have it. It's not his. Or you would have found it in, you'd find something. You'd find the sharpener, at least in the parents' home. So like you said, everything has to be explained.
Yeah. Daddy Kane, welcome. You have an interesting question. I would like more information on this. Danity Kane says, so they do not have the documentation behind the DNA match. What do you mean? What was that in a document? Wow. I haven't heard that yet. Please tell us more. Wow.
That's a bombshell.
True. A lot of this information.
Haven't read. Yeah, we can't confirm because you haven't. These documents, it was like 200 pages that got dumped on the public today. It's like, it's been that way, you get nothing for weeks. And then all of a sudden, everything gets disclosed at one time. And so I'd be curious where that's in the records that they don't have that.
Wow. If they don't have documentation, that is not good at all. Okay, Danity Kane says, I think it was on Lana something about they don't have the documentation. They didn't save their documentation.
I think you're talking about the backup to the IgG. Maybe that's it. And 23andMe went bankrupt, huh? They went out of business. And although I don't think 23andMe was involved in this, but I'm sure that's going. this case, if it does anything, I think that business of this genetic, spit in a tube. If you want to find out who, what your heritage is or who your ancestors are, I think that has really, this case has probably dealt a big blow to that entire industry. It doesn't surprise me that 23andMe is out, but okay, yeah. So we're going to look at the document. The stuff with the DNA, it comes down to one person only, and his name's Judge Stephen J. Hippler. We got to see what he rules on all of this, if it stays or goes. What do you think? What do you think the chances are of defense hitting a home run on this one with Becca Barlow arguing this motion?
I don't know how Steve Hippler is going to respond, but I think either way, Baker has got this under control, more so than anyone else in the courtroom. Well, besides Hippler, of course, but him aside. Well, Danity Kane, thank you for letting me know that information. I'm going to have to watch her live to find out more information. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Welcome, JB. JB says, yes, they are also having a detective testify to seeing a receipt for the knife sheath also, but it was lost. It was lost.
How do you go back to Amazon?
I must be behind.
Yeah. Hey, Amazon loses. They go back to Amazon. That doesn't sound. I have to see this. We have to watch these arguments on the 9th when that comes out, because if it was purchased from Amazon, how does Amazon lose a receipt? Biggest corporation in the world, they've got that.
I don't think the prosecution has a receipt.
Okay. Yeah, they're claiming in that footnote they're going to be able to tie it back that it was Koberger's. It wasn't his family's. It was delivered to the house. I don't want to give the address, because their parents. The idea.
It said in there it was delivered. I must have missed that too. Where does it say it was delivered?
It was stated that it was his father's account. So unless he's sending the stuff to his school, which he would not be doing, it was sent to his home in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. Nothing was recovered. So they're saying here, now we're going to find out at this hearing what this means, that they have witnesses who will be able to testify that this was Koberger's. Now, if receipts are lost, that's going to be a problem, because it doesn't work in the courtroom, that wild theories and this, and we can have this was his purchase, or, somebody planted the sheath there. That's great. At this stage of the proceedings, though, we've got to be able to point to the record where any of that is. Now, if he's saying that they don't have a receipt, that it went directly from Amazon to Koberger, or even to Koberger's property, then what's the state talking about, in this documentation?
Well, the state has two witnesses. One of them, I do believe, is a special agent, Douglas. The other one is Mr. Cox, who wasn't quite an expert, but the state is trying to say that he is an expert, and they have click activity. So they will use these two experts on the click activity to paint a picture, to tell a story, because they don't have a receipt. So they have to kind of color in the areas to suggest to the jury that Brian did buy these things, but they don't have, it doesn't seem like they have documentation. It's
not a lay witness who said, I saw, I know, I heard.
No.
An expert witness? Is that, where do they disclose it to expert witnesses?
I will show you.
In the footnote, right? In the footnote. That would be the in limine motion regarding they're trying to get that large, crazy amount of evidence into the case without authentication.
It was in there, the state's response to the Amazon clicks. Let me bring
right. That's it. That's going to be the one. I think it's like the bottom page 3 or 4. They say that they have witnesses, but if it's expert witnesses, what do you need expert witnesses to testify for? You need lay witnesses, same as the defense needed a lay witness, to be able to substantiate the alibi defense, not an expert witness. Big difference.
Oh, I can never find anything on this site.
There's only about 100,000 documents. That's why. All right, let's look.
Amazon click activity. I found it. Okay, so down here it says
State's response, right?
on December 18, 2024, the state disclosed Shane Cox, he's a litigation regulatory manager to law enforcement response for Amazon.com as a witness for the above evidence. As articulated in the disclosure, it is the state's position that Shane Cox's testimony is not expert testimony pursuant to the Idaho Rule 701. However, out of abundance of caution, the state disclosed Mr. Cox as an expert pursuant to the Idaho Rules of Evidence 702. The state made this strategic decision slowly to ensure the state was not precluded from calling Mr. Cox as a witness if subsequently made the determination of that his testimony is based on specialized knowledge. So he's going to testify to the
not this.
returns.
Right. No. It's not that. It's it's in a footnote that they say these are the people that are from Amazon who are going to be able to testify about the purchase from Amazon. But there's a state is awaiting. No, not that. I think it's further down.
Oh, are you sure? It's right after.
What'd you pull up the affidavit of Brett Payne for?
It's at the bottom of this.
Oh, it is. I forgot. I mean, his affidavit keeps coming up. No, go back up when he says where he says that. Okay,
there it is.
And it also touches it. Testimony from witnesses with knowledge that the defendant purchased a K-bar. The defendant touches on the issue of identifying the account user making the Amazon search inquiries as shown by the click activity. Defendant's motion at page 4. The state recognizes that the identity of the user making the inquiries is relevant, and the state intends to rely not only on the click activity but also other circumstances to connect the defendant to the original purchase and subsequent search inquiries for a replacement and or sheath. This will include the defendant's financial activities. So they're going to see what paid for it. Did it come out of the father? Did the father pay for it, or did Brian pay for it? The click activities vis-a-vis other events such as the homicide. A related purchase activity connected only to the defendant, and testimony from witnesses with knowledge. That is not an expert. That is a person with firsthand knowledge. It's the lay witness. And witnesses, and this is plural, with knowledge that the defendant purchased a K-bar. That's what I'm focused on. I want to know who these witnesses with knowledge are. Two sets of witnesses. You have expert witnesses like a Big Barlow, then you have a fact witness like a DM. Saw, seen, know things firsthand. So I want to know who these witnesses with knowledge that the defendant purchased the K-bar is. Because if they, we could sit here all day and but if they are able to substantiate that this purchase came out of his account and that it was his purchase, that's a problem. I think that this jury looking at it is going to have some concerns about that. Now I know that then, it's just a sheath, but like you said, everything has to be explained in this case from both sides. Like the state has to start with, what the heck are you talking about that these crimes happened at 4 o'clock in the morning, but law enforcement doesn't arrive there until noon? They got to explain that. And then they have to explain so many other things. But, the defense is going to have to explain. If there's a witness with knowledge, if they spoke with, don't know who it could be, if the purchase happened in Monroe County, it's got to be someone there. I'm referring to, okay, so we're back. Okay, the DNA is arguing they don't have the dog. Right. I believe was okay. Well, right now, they pretty much defense, and I think that was a pretty genius move, have put the state into a corner in getting them to agree that, your tip came December 19th and not mentioning the feds. I think that's a big win for them But this right here, I want to find out who are these witnesses with knowledge and what receipts do they have. If it's money coming out of Koberger's bank account, that's a problem. Then it's going to be he purchased it. And we can say, oh, well, millions of people. But all right, jury, that's a lot. A lot of cases, guys, people get convicted on circumstantial evidence all the time. And if he gets convicted, it's very hard to overturn a jury verdict. He could sit in jail or prison for years until maybe they come back and well, Hitler should have made this ruling on the motion, in limine, or Hitler should have made that ruling. Meantime, if he didn't commit these crimes, he's sitting in prison for years, and he is a target, for other people, because we've all heard those stories about how other people in jail, they don't like these famous, people that they're reading. Oh, who are you? How do they know? There he is. Can you just imagine what's being yelled at him right now in Ada County that he didn't hear in Layton, in that small jail? Yeah, they do. JB, we were just talking about that last night, how the PCA describes the wounds. We've gotten, one of the family members came out and said that, his family member's wounds were different from someone else. But the PCA also, it was Ethan, and, Detective Payne walks in and he can right away make, just by eyeballing things, and maybe what he's heard from whoever's there, what the injuries to Zana, to Kaylee, and to Madison were from. They needed the medical examiner for Ethan. They couldn't even, so it's telling me they couldn't even eyeball it. So yeah, the PCA is different.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how did that sheath get there? I mean, that jury's going to want to find that out. How did that sheath with his DNA get there? You're convinced me this is hot. Yeah, it is. Yeah, no wonder the grand jury felt the DM. Well, we found that, we were anticipating this winter bliss because, when you do an investigation, whatever it is, and my experience was in business, like somebody complains that someone else was harassing them. So then you got to separate everybody. You've got, an allegation. You speak with your people. You tell them don't talk to anybody else, and you go where the evidence leads you to. You don't have a preconceived notion of where it's going to go. And unfortunately, we see from the beginning, they didn't separate the witnesses, and we got a clue about that. And CJ has talked also in his show about that once, who was it? Lanier showed up, that he saw that he needed to call in other resources because this crime scene was huge and he saw a lot of people out front. Yeah. Okay. So what else from today's doc drop, Audrey? Anything else that we wanted to talk about? Because there's hundreds of other documents, and it's all going to come down to how he rules, and I'm just going to, as I said, I'm going to make this prediction that I think he's going to leave a lot of it to the jury, but I think he's going to, that motion in limine for the alibi defense, it's going out the window unless Koberger takes the stand, and he's not going to take the stand. So that's going to probably get granted on the state side. On the defense's side, I think they've attacked the self-authentication of a number of records that they're gonna have to show a lot more than what they did. I think the defense is probably going to come up on the winning end of that one. As far as all the rest, I don't know. Mm-hmm. Okay.
CJ, you're so right. I do remember you had that theory that it was for protection, and then you always make me laugh with these DNA dirty gloves. It's so true, though. It just sounds funny when you say it. But yeah, I think you're the only one that I've seen that still has that drone footage, which is great that you still have that.
CJ Kane has got a good.
Great footage.
I think if he's innocent, he should take the stand. A lot of people feel that way. Of course he is no criminal defendant, and thank goodness for our Fifth Amendment, can ever be compelled to take the stand. But what he did here is he voluntarily floated what I think is a sorry attempt at an alibi defense. And you need witnesses to be able to corroborate. You don't send in an expert to corroborate unless that expert can say, yes, I saw, I heard, I know. But a lot of people feel the same way you do, CA. If he's innocent, he should take the stand. He can't be compelled. Juries want to hear from defendants, but I don't know how good of a witness he would be. If he might not come across very likable. People, seem to have impressions about him, possibly because of the autism and the repetitive things that he does. But a lot of people feel that way. If he's innocent, he should take the stand and explain what happened, where he was that night.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Audrey, I'm sorry. I have to go. I wanted to thank you very, very much for getting on tonight as you are. You've been very, very on top of things. But I got another commitment that I have to run to. And we'll see what the rest of these documents show. And again, everybody, if you can't watch it live, watch the repeats of the 9th and the 10th. These are going to be game changers for both. There's a lot at stake for both sides. And it's all going to come down to what Judge Hippler rules. And I think that when he starts hearing these arguments about, the self-authentication of records, which I think that the defense has got a good shot of winning that one, the 911 call. I mean, look at what's on the line here. The AT&T timing, the other motions in limine, bushy eyebrows, 404B evidence. There's a lot there's a lot here at stake. So we'll definitely see where Hippler is. And once he makes those rulings, I think we're going to have a better idea as to where this case is going to. And also don't forget, there's a 7th motion to compel discovery floating out there that he's going to set a hearing on. And if the vehicle identification is huge. Yep. Vehicle identification is going to be huge. I agree with you. Suspect vehicle 1, and its supposed travels is one of the key things that got him arrested. So I'm sure they got a top knot. Both of them probably have, good vehicle experts. But anyway, yeah, it's going to all come down to what Hippler rules. After he rules, what evidence comes in, what evidence doesn't come in, then we're going to have a better idea as to whose case, is stronger, weaker, same. But Audrey, I want to thank you for the invite. I really enjoyed chatting with you, as I always do. I hope we can do this again.
Always a pleasure. Yes.
Pleasure. And thank you to everybody.
Thank you for coming.
Feedback. My pleasure. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Wow, Kathy is such a great guest. I really enjoy having her on. And so that was excellent to get all that information that we have from her. She really knows the process. It was really great to hear from her the order that these motions are posted on the docket. Yeah, you guys have such great things to say in the chat here. Oh, and you know what? Typically unique. Welcome. There, let's see. I saw you there, and then I am very interested to hear what you were saying, Danity Kane. That they don't have the match. Do you know what document that was? Oh, was it the inconclusive data, maybe? I think I brought that one up. Here. Let's see. Oh. Well, I did want to read the other, this one. Let's see. So this one is by Becca. It says, reply to state's objection, motion limiting number 6 regarding Nolan and touch and contact DNA. It says, come now, Brian C. Koberger, Brian through his attorney of record, and hereby respectfully replies to the state's objection to Mr. Koberger's motion to exclude specific opinions of Riley Nolan and the terms touch DNA and contact DNA. The state's objection is that the use of the term touch DNA will not mislead a jury, that Nolan's testimony on how the DNA was placed on Q1.1 is proper testimony, and that despite Nolan's opinion being the state's theory, that it is proper rebuttal to the testimony of the defense expert, Dr. Ruth Ballard. Mr. Koberger will address each objection in order. A, the use of term touch DNA will mislead and confuse the jury. In Mr. Koberger's motion to eliminate number 6 at 3-8, he sets forth in detail the history of the use of the terms touch and contact DNA and the growing concern with the use of those words, so much that a recent report from NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, offered the recommendation that analysts should not offer opinions as to the how and when that particular DNA sample came to be on an object. The state's opposition argues that the only purpose of the use of the word touch in context of DNA is to distinguish between samples that collected from known or visible stains such as blood, saliva, and semen, and DNA that may be deposited on an item by handling or wearing. What this argument fails to consider, and Mr. Koberger forcibly explains, the use of the word touch in the context of DNA implies a fact that is not known, that the DNA was in fact deposited via touching the object. The implication of the word is the issue, not the description of the type of sample or the means that DNA can transfer through the environment. A close reading of Nolan's now 3 disclosures, and there's a 1 for the footnote. So down here at the footnote, it says, a new, different disclosure from Nolan was filed on March 14, 2025. This disclosure was not touched on in motion eliminating number 6 because Mr. Koberger had yet to see it. Okay, let's go back up. And the document further says, shows the inherent problem with the use of the word touch and the lack of any need to use the term. In her first disclosure, S11, Nolan describes the ways in which DNA can move in the environment using language such as direct, indirect transfer without the word touch, except to describe the action of a person actually touching an item and transferring DNA. In the March 3rd, 2025 disclosure, S17, Nolan for the first time uses the term touch DNA as a descriptor, not a verb. At S17, at number 2, the court simply removed the word touch. No, if the court simply removed the word touch from the disclosure, the description of the concepts laid out would not suffer and would be as clear as the earlier similar description in S7. Nolan seems to switch between using the word touch in reference to describing a type of DNA, indicating that it is not necessary to offer a cogent description of the process of transfer laid out in her disclosures. The state cites to a single case for the proposition that experts in other cases have used the phrase touch DNA. This case is from 2016 and discussing the availability of technology to test touch DNA in the time frame of 2007 to 2012. And for the support, the state offers a single article which references sampling methods for touch DNA. It ignores the articles cited by Mr. Koberger, which are reviews of the literature. These reviews cover in total over 300 scientific articles. As compared to the single article presented in the state's opposition, the state has presented no articles advocating for the use of touch DNA. Finally, the state offers Nolan's statement that the term is typically used. There's a footnote. Go under the footnote. It says, Nolan also points to the use of touch DNA in Dr. Ballard's disclosure. Mr. Koberger understands that if the court grants his motion, Dr. Ballard would not be able to use that term. Okay, let's go back up. The state does not present any documents, peer-reviewed journals, articles, or other materials that advocates for the term touch or contact in reference to DNA samples taken from the term where the lab did not see an obvious body fluid stain and did nothing to determine the presence of any possible biological source. And that was 3. There's a footnote, number 3, and that says the state could have conducted blood, saliva, or semen testing to eliminate or establish the presence of one of these fluids, one of these fluid types, but chose not to do so. Nolan's affidavit offers no support to the necessity of using the term touch, other than to state that it is a term that is widely used. Nowhere does she point to any references that support the position that it is the only means available to describe the type of sample that is being tested. As is clear from her previous disclosures, she very clearly and concisely describes transfer as a concept without using the term. None of this is convincing and does nothing to reboot the peer-reviewed opinions of the authors cited by Mr. Koberger, that the use of these terms can be misleading and suggests a mode of action which is unknown. Number 4, there's a footnote. We'll go down to the footnote. Number 4, Mr. Koberger in no way suggests a substitute for the word touch or contact. Nolan's disclosure clearly shows a description of the concept of transfer does not require the use of touch or contact for the explanation and testimony to be clear and cogent. All right, going back up. The use of the descriptors touch and contact DNA are not necessary to the description of transfer laid out in Nolan's disclosures and would only mislead and confuse the jury and require a significant consumption of time and cross-examination to prove a point that the state seems to concede that the use of the word is not intended to imply how the DNA on Q1.1. To imply the how of the DNA on Q1.1. B, the opinion of how the transfer of DNA to Q1.1 is not proper expert testimony. To reboot the citations on the research on the topic of the transfer and the analysis ability to assess transfer in a particular case, the state offered a brief conclusionary affidavit from Nolan. This affidavit does nothing to assure or assist this court in coming to a decision. As stated in motion in limine number 6, the state intends to offer Nolan's opinion that the DNA found on Q1.1 is from direct contact, despite acknowledging that current DNA technology cannot conclusively answer the question of when DNA was deposited on an item or by what mechanism. Nolan essentially places her subjective personal opinion in direct contradiction that the technology used cannot answer that question. This type of opinion and testimony is exactly the type of misleading testimony that the EWG, that's the work group for NIST, was concerned about. Idaho Rules of Evidence 702, 703, and 403 govern the admissibility of expert testimony. As set forth in motion in limine number 6, Mr. Koberger objects to the specific testimony of Nolan regarding her opinion that the DNA found on Q1.1 is more likely the result of direct transfer. A qualified expert may testify in the form of an opinion only if their specialized knowledge will assist the trier of fact to understand the evidence or determine a fact and issue, because a verdict cannot rest on speculation or conjecture. Expert opinion, which is speculative, conclusory, and unsubstantiated by facts in the record, is of no assistance to the jury in rendering its verdict, and therefore is inadmissible as evidence under Rule 702. Okay. Here's a quote. The admissibility of expert opinion testimony depends on the expert's ability to explain pertinent scientific principles and to apply those principles to the formulation of his or her opinion. Thus, the key to admission of the opinion is the validity of the expert's reasoning and methodology. In resolving these issues, the trial court should not substitute its judgment for that of the relevant scientific community. The court's function is to distinguish scientifically sound reasoning from that of the self-validating expert who uses scientific terminology to present unsubstantiated personal beliefs. 1, Nolan is not an expert in transfer. I love how just because, like, no, you're not expert in that, but she can't be. We don't have a system for that. We don't have training for that. The field for that is not developed. So Becca Barlow is 100% correct when she says Nolan is not an expert in transfer. Okay, so the paper goes on, the motion goes on to say the first question for the court is whether Nolan has the proper expertise to proffer an opinion of how the DNA arrived on the sheath. As set forth in Mr. Koberger's motion in limine number 6 at 4-8, the expertise for how and when opinions require a different type of expertise that exceeds that of the standard training and expertise of a DNA lab analyst. That's right. There is, okay, side note, there is literature out there that Sarah DeIva shared with me today, one in particular that was written by Australian scientists, where they theorize that maybe they can develop a way, or they have theorized different ways to determine the activity level, which would be the how and the when. However, I don't think that's quite here in the U.S. yet. I mean, we're just barely hearing about it in motions, let alone that it actually being practiced. Okay, so moving on. Nowhere in its reply to expertise in the area, nor does Nolan in her affidavit. Not mentioned by Nolan in her affidavit is the recommendation of the EWG. That's the expert working group of the NIST. National Institute for Standards and Technology. Okay, so 5, there's a footnote. Let's go down this is a long footnote. This recommendation was objected to by 2 of the 25 members of the EWG, not because training on this subject is not important or necessary, but because they question how forensic service providers will determine who the experts are for the transfer and recovery. That's a type of DNA. They call it DNA TPPR. And that goes into the transfer. That denotes that it is transfer, as opposed to any other type of DNA. And formal activity evaluation training, as well as what constitutes appropriate professional guidance in the United States. They are also concerned that currently available guidance may not employ the necessary safeguards that typically exist in a quality system of an accredited forensic service provider. For example, the validation, the competency, and the proficiency testing, appropriate discovery, reporting processes, and similar measures. Additionally, as stated in their objection to 7.1, these members believe recommendation 7.2 is premature until recommendation 7.3 is implemented. Now, if you watch the last 2 lives, I went into how Riley Nolan misrepresented the dissenters in this report that was written by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And so Becca Barlow is going into that. And we did go over these quick, great little recommendation boxes that were in the report. So Becca Barlow has put in here number 7.2. So this is recommendation 7.2, and the two dissenters think that the 7.2 is premature until 7.3 is implemented. However, they do agree with it, but again, they want the appropriate professional guidance. They want to know, they question who the experts will be for this. They want more information and guidance on this. Recommendation 7.2, the evaluation of DNA results given how and when questions distinct from the evaluation of DNA results given who questions, in order to develop policies and practices on how DNA analysts should respond appropriately to questions about how and when DNA was deposited in a particular case. Forensic science service providers should consult professional guidance, documents, and experts who understand issues related to transfer and persistence. These policies and practices should require DNA analysts to be appropriately trained to respond to such questions. Right, and Nolan is not. She's not trained to do so. And that all came out of this report called Forensic DNA Interpretation and Human Factors, Improving Practice Through a Systems Approach. Okay, the paper goes on to say, a close review of Nolan's experience shows that she has no specialized training or experiences in the area of transfer. Her CV attached to disclosure 12/18/2024 lists no substantive training in the area of transfer. It appears that she may have attended some presentations at the American Academy of Forensic Science, AFS, meeting in February 2025, but she provides no details regarding the presentation she attended, despite the fact that the materials are available online. Number 6 is a footnote. Let's go down and read that. Okay, so she provides the annual conference proceedings, and we went over that too. That was in the live right before this one. Okay, cool. So Becca Barlow is giving us the link to the conference that Nolan claimed that she went to. So reading on, none of her presentations or publications involved transfer, and she has pointed to no research or experience she has in the area of transfer to substantiate her ability to offer an opinion on how and when of the DNA in this case. Nolan may be qualified to testify about DNA testing. She is not competent or qualified to offer an opinion regarding the specific evidence in this case. Number 2, opinion of Nolan regarding direct transfer is speculative and not founded in sufficient facts. The Idaho courts have long held that speculative expert testimony is inadmissible. And here's a quote, testimony is speculative when it theorizes about a matter as to which evidence is not sufficient for certain knowledge. An opinion is speculative suggestions, only possibilities, and may be properly excluded since the opinion would not assist the trier of fact. Expert testimony will assist the trier of fact when the reasoning or methodology underlying the opinion is scientifically sound. In determining whether expert testimony is admissible, the court must evaluate the expert's ability to explain pertinent scientific principles and to apply those principles to the formulation of his or her opinion. Now they're going to quote Ryan Supra. I think, is that a case? While the court must distinguish scientifically sound reasoning from that of the self-validating expert who uses scientific terminology to present unsubstantiated personal beliefs, it may not substitute its judgment for that of the relevant scientific community. Here, Nolan presents an opinion that Idaho Supreme Court specifically warns against, a personal belief presented as a possibility without any scientific basis to support the opinion. In response to Mr. Koberger's motion in limine number 6, the state filed a short affidavit from Nolan reasserting without any factual or scientific support that there is not a consensus in the scientific community that DNA lab analysts should not opine about DNA transfer persistence of recovery, the DNA TPPR, in support of this argument. Nolan points to the dissent of 2 expert working group members to the recommendations of the expert working group that analysts not present these opinions. However, the statement by Nolan is incomplete and misleading, which we did a whole live on that, and it is. While Nolan is correct in that 2 of the 25 members dissented, their dissent is not supportive of Nolan's position because they, like all other working group members, agree. Their dissent is not supportive of Nolan's position because they, like all the other EWG members, agree that this type of testimony can be misleading and otherwise problematic. 2 members, Lynn Garcia and Don Boswell, do not support recommendation 7.1. While they acknowledge that analysts are often asked to respond to how and when questions in criminal cases and agree that testimony on this subject can be misleading or otherwise problematic. Okay, let me read that again. The 2 members, Lynn Garcia and Don Boswell, do not support recommendation 7.1. While they acknowledge that analysts are often asked to respond to how and when questions in criminal cases and agree that testimony on this subject can be misleading or otherwise problematic. They believe that the broad prohibition in recommendation 7.1 puts the proverbial cart before the horse, but by not first requiring an assessment of the type of outline in recommendation 7.3. Moreover, they worry that supporting 7.1 would imply the need for analysts to shift to a new paradigm that has not yet been sufficiently vetted within the specific context of the U.S. court system, and that is huge. To shift everything we know about DNA in the court and how they are partnered or closely work together. That is their major concern there. And Riley Nolan completely just glossed over it and misrepresented both of their opinions. Anyway, moving on. Yeah, again, so all of this in here that Nolan referenced, and it's basically referencing what Becca Barlow is referencing from this big report that we keep talking about called Forensic DNA Interpretation and Human Factors, Improving Practice Through a Systems Approach. All right, the paper goes on to say, I keep calling it a paper, it's a motion. The motion goes on to say, this objection is not an endorsement of this type of testimony. Rather, it voices concerns that essentially there is no adequate training or system in place to support the scientific validity of the how and when opinion. Nolan next points to the lack of consensus within the forensic DNA community on the use of this type of testimony. However, this is more argument than fact. Nolan asserts that the other side of the debate believes that not offering an opinion based on knowledge of molecular biology / DNA may it aid the trier of fact is unethical, and that there were presentation on both sides of the argument. At a recent meeting of the American Academy of Sciences, AAFS, Nolan does not provide the identities of the community she cites for support or any article or presentation that supports her statements, nor does she explain how ethical norms are being violated or that there are ethical guidelines that support this contention. Nolan has presented no scientific arguments or research on the topic that supports her opinions, as is demanded by Idaho law and so clearly stated in Ryan Supra. The admissibility of expert opinion testimony depends on the expert's ability to explain pertinent scientific principles and to apply those principles to the formulation of his or her opinion. Thus, the key to admission of the opinion is the validity of the expert reasoning and methodology. Even a signed affidavit, Nolan can produce no scientific principles that apply to the formulation of her opinion. And she has offered this court no reasoned basis for her opinion other than two bare facts. The court needs to consider carefully her full opinion. Okay, so her full opinion, I guess it's this. Yeah, so Riley Nolan's full opinion. Many complicated factors can influence the likelihood of transfer of DNA and the persistence of the transferred DNA after disposition. Currently, DNA technology cannot conclusively answer the question of when DNA was deposited on an item or by what mechanism, for example, direct or indirect transfer. It is possible the DNA detected on item 1.1 resulted from secondary transfer. However, based on Nolan's training and experience, where there isn't any, it is her opinion, given the quantity of DNA detected on item 1.1, and that this is the amount, but that's actually a concentration amount. It's a concentration. You know that because it says UL, the /UL, and that tells you that's a concentration. If it wasn't a concentration, it would not have this UL after it. So we're still really not sure the amount of the original source sample or the amount recovered. Anyway, we'll keep going. And given the DNA profile obtained a signal source, it is more likely the result of direct transfer. Okay, so that was Riley's opinion. So first, Nolan explains that there are many complicated factors affecting the transfer of DNA, states that the current technology cannot conclusively answer the question of how and when of transfer, explains that the DNA on the item Q1.1 could possibly be due to indirect transfer, but that her own opinion, her own personal training and experience led her to the conclusion that DNA is more likely due to direct transfer. Nolan essentially offers the court and ultimately the jury a confusing opinion that the science does not allow for a conclusive determination of how and when of transfer, and that both scenarios, direct and indirect transfer, are possible, but she believes that direct transfer is more likely. This opinion could not be more speculative. An opinion that is speculative suggests only possibilities and may be properly excluded, since the opinion would not assist the trier of fact. This opinion would not be helpful to a jury and would tend to confuse and mislead the jury. Nolan only offers possibilities based on no substantive scientific principles, and which flies in the face of the science that Nolan herself agrees with, that this type of opinion cannot be conclusively determined. Mr. Koberger would be prejudiced by the speculative opinion, and substantial court time would be consumed in the cross-examination and impeachment of this witness and this opinion, and therefore this opinion should be excluded. Let me read that last sentence one more time before we get to the conclusion. Mr. Koberger would be prejudiced by the speculative opinion, and substantial court time would be consumed in the cross-examination and impeachment of this witness and this opinion, and therefore this opinion should be excluded. Becca Barlow is prepared to impeach Riley Nolan. So no matter what Hitler does with this, Becca's ready. And I think that is a bold statement right there. I mean, I don't know. Do attorneys just flat out say, all right, well, if you're going to testify to that, I will impeach you. Like that is some bold, very confident stuff right there. And it's amazing. I fully believe Becca when she says that. She may have impeached her in this motion as well. But we'll see what Hitler says, but I can't wait to see Becca. She just says, yeah, we're going to waste time impeaching her if you want to do that, Blair. Oh my God, I can't even handle it. Okay, so conclusion. Mr. Koberger's opinion to exclude the use of the words touch and contact DNA, as well as the opinion of Nolan regarding the how and when of the DNA should be excluded. Oh my gosh, what do you guys think of that? That Becca is just so bold. She just comes out and says it. Oh, Winter Bliss says Becca will also shred the chain of custody. I believe you're right. We have another question for Kathy. Well, she will be back and we'll be able to ask her. She is so knowledgeable about all of this. So that will be a very good question for her. Winter Bliss asks, Kathy, question. Will all of the Instagram messages, TikTok, Snapchats at all come into evidence? And that is a very good question. Mommy Ball says, one side of many arguments is, expletive. All right, so Danny Kane says, I'm back. Yeah, you guys are still here. Welcome back, Danny Kane. I just was finished reading Becca Barlow's reply here. Becca Barlow, she's so confident that she basically told the judge, we're going to waste time if you don't exclude her opinion. Because, I wouldn't want to be on the other side of Becca. Okay, Diana Kane says, I love that you guys are commingling your knowledge and experience. It makes for a really interesting show. Oh, thank you about that. Thank you. That is awesome. Yes, Kathy brings a lot of expertise. Just, amazing things. And she definitely she makes this fun. And so, this is what it's all about. Well, I could talk all day about how exciting this is, because when I was first learning about transferred DNA, I realized that it completely changed everything that we thought about science and DNA. And as I've observed it over the years, not many people have understood it, which is fine. I didn't, so I just kept reading about it. And it does get lumped in with regular DNA, but it really does. It's completely separate. I really think that it should be changed. The name should be changed to something else, because it behaves a lot differently than your typical blood, sweat, semen, saliva. There's a lot of data in that biomaterial. There's a lot to look through with that. There is less data with this transfer DNA. And with this transfer DNA, sometimes it's so small you can't tell if it's blood, sweat, semen, or saliva. You can't really see what you're looking at. Let's see, Diana Kane says, it's great how big a Barlow's documents come out and just back up everything you've been talking about. Isn't that amazing? So, everybody here, including me, we've all been learning together. And we have been learning right alongside Becca. And she's also taught a lot. And the way that she writes, and that she's got all of this on the court record, I can't imagine what kind of ripples and waves that's going to make for future cases. These future cases and defense attorneys, they need to save all of these documents that Becca is writing and cite them and defend your client because Becca is a game changer. This is Becca, alongside of the that report from NIST The one that we actually read. I can't believe we read that before Becca talked about it in her original motion limine. But with Becca and that report, the landscape of DNA changing, I think, is on a faster course now, a lot faster than it was before. And, you know, as we've all learned so much. We've all learned very quickly about this transfer DNA and how it is not anything like the other types of DNA. That if we're able to learn very quickly, I think that, you know, mirrors what's going to happen, you know, when people, you know, in the courts. Everything is just going to be faster when people learn about it in court. People, you know, just everywhere. It's just going to make a huge difference. Danny Kane says, this isn't the last case that they will try and railroad somebody over transfer DNA. I think it's great. Hopefully this will set a status quo. Yeah. Danny Kane, I believe this will be a landmark case. I believe in DNA cases going forward, they're going to reference the Koberger. Even if Koberger is convicted, even if Hiffler decides, yeah, I don't want any of this, or, you know, the jury is going to decide any of this. Regardless of all of that, this Koberger v. Idaho. And if we read future court cases, we'll see it. We'll see the name Koberger v. Idaho. It'll be in there. And they'll be using it to support arguments, just like you're saying, Danny King. And it's amazing because we haven't had that before. Defense attorneys typically don't argue for it. They don't really question it. And that's what creates change. It's the defense attorneys that have the courage to say, you know what, let's look into this. Let's ask questions. And it also, what makes the difference is when judges ask questions too. When the judges ask questions and they scrutinize things, that's when the legal system is at its best. So Mommy Ball says, yes, the very idea of letting Miss Ma'am opine in a death penalty case. Oh, yeah. And I have such you guys are great chatters, great subscribers, great commenters. I think one of you was saying that, and I completely agree, that it should be required of death penalty cases and the judges on the death penalty cases to be able to have some sort of guidance or some sort of like training that they need to do. And in that training, there will be some lessons on what transfer DNA is. And I think that that's reasonable, especially if you're presiding over a death penalty case. You know, maybe it doesn't have to be every judge. Only in these special circumstances should that be important. So yeah, it could be very damaging to have an opinion that is not substantiated in fact, or training or experience, which Riley Nolan says that she wants to do. That is very damaging, not only to Koberger, but to the system, to other lab analysts. All right, Diana Kane says, I think that it says something to BK's innocence that so many people are willing to stand and speak to the case. I think you're right. I think intuitively we all knew something was wrong here, and we asked questions. See what a difference it makes when you start asking questions. It makes a difference. And so we have an amazing defense team here who is asking questions. And it's going to make the legal system better for it, you know, and that's just incredible. You know, the legal system isn't always up to date with the latest technology or the latest technology in science or technology, period. So these types of questions and the type of information that Becca is getting on the record, well, fast tracking something in the legal system is not really fast, but it will be much faster than I thought it was going prior to Becca. I thought that it would take 10, 15, 20 years for the court to catch up with what science actually has accomplished when it comes to learning and regulating the transfer DNA. But this is awesome. And all right, so like Becca's prior motion to eliminate, she flat out just said the theory of the state's case is not based in fact. It's not based in science. And then now she's saying, Epler, if you allow this opinion, you're just going to be wasting time because I'm going to impeach her. Who does that? That's so awesome. All right, so Richard Bliss says, I love that Kathy keeps it real and is such a wonderful communicator. Oh, yeah. She's balanced and has the experience and parks a lot of emotion and hyperbole at the door. Yes, she is very good at that. And that is actually one of her strong suits. I think that's a lot of reason why she has such a big fan base. She comes with the facts and she hits them hard. Very good. She's always been one of my favorites. I met her on Twitter, and we met by talking about this case. And I mean, as you can see, it's always just so much fun talking with Kathy, and so it's so great that you guys get to experience and talk to Kathy too. It really does make a huge difference. Absolutely. So, what Kathy keeps saying is April 9th. We will get to hear, hopefully it's open, more about all the motion and eliminates, because that's it. They had the initial motion, the reply, and then this reply. There was only 3 things. So now they're done. They can't talk about it anymore in the motions, and then it'll all be argued at the motion eliminate, or the hearing on April 9th. I do plan to stream that day. So does Kathy. And I pinned Kathy's YouTube at the top of the chat. I will also put all of her links in the description. She is on Amazon. She's on Apple. I think she's on Goodreads. She's on a website also that makes everything very easy to search. That one is invaluable because you just put in a word and the search engine is better than Google. It is the best search engine ever. So you're not wasting time looking for stuff. It retrieves it. And it's a very good resource because you're not wasting time just trying to figure out where things are. So that'll be down there. I'm so excited. I cannot wait for April 9th so I can see Becca just impeach the state's DNA witness. That'll be awesome. Danny Kate says, I'm happy to see that your channel is growing and people giving you an ear. Aw, I am too. Yeah. And you guys make this all worth it. You guys are so smart and I learned from you, and it's just such a back and forth community where we all can learn from each other and it's interactive, and it's really great. I've just enjoyed, this whole process, this whole case. I mean, every one of you that's here in chat and on replay crew, we have all come a long way in the past 3 years. I know that all my learning has been on overdrive, and I know all of yours is too, and we all bring our unique experiences, which is absolutely amazing. And it's so much fun, like learning from everybody. Well, I'm going to say goodnight now. I thank you all for coming. Check out Kathy's channel. Her links will be in the description. Thank you all for being here today. Hopefully, we'll go over some more DNA documents in the future, and we will all be here on April 9th. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you. Bye.